If you did not get what I like to call the healthy triad of childhood, it's really no wonder that you may be experiencing identity issues. Maybe you feel like you don't know who you are. The healthy triad is healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation. This goes back to psychoanalytic theory in Freudian psychology, where you have the id, the ego, and the superego. Specifically here, what we're focusing on is the ego state, that middle column. If you did not get healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, the likelihood that you ended up becoming enmeshed with people and your identity ended up becoming enmeshed with people is very high. That's the reason that healthy boundaries are so necessary. Where do I begin? Where do I end? Where does the next person begin? And where does the next person end? When you have no sense of grounded understanding for where it is that you begin and end, that in and of itself is a personality thing. Who are you? Who are you not? Where do you begin? Where do you end? Where are you? Where are you not? The fascinating thing, too, is this is how people end up getting so overly emotionally invested in other people because they lack healthy boundaries. What is your shit? What is not your shit? When a person gets healthy boundaries, they get the space to develop their own sense of self in a healthy way. They get to develop their own sense of identity and personality in a healthy way. Similarly, individuation. What is individuation? The process of becoming an individual that is separate from the system that you were raised in. It is healthy to become an individual and individuate away from the system in terms of how you think, how you see yourself in the world, how you feel, the things that you're interested in, developing your own opinions. Differentiation is a lot more also to do with boundaries, differentiating between self and other. People that did get healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation actually had the space to develop their own senses of self, their own personality, the way that they would think, the way that they would feel, the way that they would behave, their interests, their opinions. That's the reality of it. Now, if you did not get healthy boundaries, you enmeshed yourself with people that you learned to believe somehow had to do with who you are. And maybe, for instance, you became codependent as a result of that. Codependents are really just people that learned a lack of healthy boundaries. They learned to excessively tune into other people also for their own senses of self. Your own sense of self has nothing to do with anybody else. That's why the healthy boundaries are important, and understanding that can really transform the dynamic of not only how you approach yourself, but how you approach other. Again, healthy boundaries is where you begin and where you end. It has everything to do with that. And understanding how that operates in dynamic with other people is the really important thing to understand here. So maybe, for instance, you feel like you don't know who you are. Maybe you feel like you have identity issues. Maybe you feel like you are exceedingly reliant on other people for your own sense of self. Maybe you feel like your self-worth is very much out there. It's very much tied to somebody out there or something out there. That in and of itself is actually a boundary violation, because where you begin and where you end, say for instance if it was me, is right here and right here. It's not out there, it's not over there, it's right here. So I am essentially violating my own boundaries by putting my sense of self-worth somewhere out there. This is very important to understand, as it can help you understand that the boundary is all about this. It's right here. This is Chris. This is the boundary. I am not out there. I'm not out there. I'm not out there. I'm not in that person. I'm not in that person. I'm not, that person's not in me. That person's not in me. This is me. The next person, it would be the same thing for. So essentially, I guess you could say, antidote to this, the solution to this is really giving yourself what it is that you didn't have in childhood, which is the healthy triad: healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation. The space to develop a clear understanding of who you are. Because as it is right now, if you were raised in a way that voided the healthy triad of childhood, the healthy boundaries, the individuation, and differentiation, the likelihood that you just enmeshed yourself with a bunch of other people in a time of survival is very high. So you enmeshed yourself in that person, or in that person, or in that person. Bob, Sally, Dan, whoever the hell, right? So what really ended up happening was their interests became yours and theirs and this, that, everyone. You are with a lack of healthy boundaries in everyone. And that's the way that it works. And so understanding that the solution now is to bring it all back to yourself and to sit with yourself and to set the healthy boundaries and to become somebody who is individuated and differentiated. You need to take a lot of time to yourself and actually figure out if you like any of the things that you have believed that you've liked forever. That is the wild thing about being raised in survival, is that you were projected out there into other people, and now you have to take all of those projections and bring them back here. You have to sit with yourself. You don't have to do any of this stuff. You can choose to, or you can choose not to. It's entirely up to you. But it's really about sitting with yourself and actually discovering if the things that you've been learned, that you have learned to believe are actually authentic for you, things that you actually like, things that you actually want, are actually those things that you like and want. Who are you? Are you aware that as an individual, like if you were to see yourself as somebody who has healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, are you aware that with that you are, say for instance, if you were me, you are right here and right here, and that's it. Not out there, not over there, not in that person, not in that thing, that nothing of that stuff. It's all right here. It doesn't matter what that person thinks about you, that person, that person. It doesn't matter what happens to that thing. None of anything out there affects you here. Now, I understand that what I'm saying might seem completely fucking crazy because a lot of people have taught you to believe that you are out there and that is in here. You are an individual. You were raised in a system that taught you to put yourself out there, meaning you were taught to tie yourself out there to people and things and attach onto meaning and opinions and ideas. You are right here. If you are Chris, which you're not, just as an example, if this was you, you would be right here and nowhere else. Now, with that and understanding that, what would it be like for you to take the time and space to yourself to develop in a healthy way, for you to actually sit with yourself by yourself and understand who it is that you actually are, separate from everyone that you were raised with, separate from the system that you were raised with, separate from even the things that you've been hardwired to believe that you are, separate from everything. If you don't know who you are, if you feel like you have identity issues, whether it's severe or even just like mildly codependent, dependent. I am dependent on other. Self is dependent on other. To a healthy extent, okay, cool. To an unhealthy extent, you don't know who you are. You don't know yourself. And that's the issue. And so when you do set the healthy boundary or boundaries, whatever it is you choose, when you do individuate, move yourself away from the system and away from everyone that you were taught to be so enmeshed with. You differentiate, oh shit, this is me, that's you. This is self, that's other. And you really start to see it for what it is. It completely transforms the entire dynamic. If you do have identity issues, the likelihood that it's because you did not get healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation in an instead survival based childhood where you had to be somebody else because your parents or caretakers, whoever it was, lacked healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation. The likelihood that you don't know who you are because you didn't get that is very high. When you think about it this way, let me end off with this just to make this very clearly understood. Consider the ego state, like I was saying before, back in psychoanalytic theory and Freudian psychology. The id, right here, the ego state, the superego. The id comes first, then the ego state, and then over time the superego develops. The ego state is very important here. If this does not get boundaries, if this thing, this entity does not get boundaries, it has a very hard time over time really understanding who the fuck it is. Likely because if it was raised in the opposite way, where it got enmeshed with everyone around it, then it's fucking everywhere. But it's not, because it's really all just right here. And that's the damage of the ego state. That's really important to understand in terms of the damage for the ego state. And it sucks to be enmeshed with people. Who the fuck wants to do that? Quite honestly. Having healthy boundaries is wonderful, because then there are no confusions as to who the fuck you are, your identity, all these different things. And you're much more grounded in your sense of self, and that's where everything is meant to be. So again, just to finish off, if you did not get the healthy triad of childhood, healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, and you feel like you don't know who you are, what you can do now for yourself is to actually set those healthy boundaries, to discover where you begin, where you end. Realize that it's actually not in other people, and other people are not in you. Other people's opinions of you don't matter. Your worth is not tied to anybody. Bring all of your power back to yourself and really sit with it. Sit in that staple of power. And you'll actually have the space to continue to further develop yourself into a further healthy individual. And that's how it works.